This is where the wealthy and the powerful rule. It is her world, a world apart from mine. Her name is Catherine. From the moment I saw her, she captured my heart with her beauty, her warmth, and her courage. I knew then, as I know now, she would change my life forever.
He comes from a secret place, far below the city streets, hiding his face from strangers, safe from hate and harm. He brought me there to save my life. And now, wherever I go, he is with me in spirit. For we have a bond stronger than friendship or love. And although we cannot be together, we will never, ever be apart.
What is it, Catherine? What makes you so sad?
Sometimes I see things, and I can't help but wonder if there's any hope left for any of us.
I have known that feeling.
A father beats his child to death. What does that say about us? About our world and the way we treat each other?
Evil exists. It's real. We know that. But when it touches little children, it tells us that no one anywhere is safe. We have children living with us below who have suffered more in their young years than anyone should be allowed in 100 lifetimes.
Where's the hope?
Within you. Within us. We must not let it die. We must protect it. For each other.
She's inside with a lawyer. I'll be here, but I don't think you'll need me.
I'm Peter Renner, Mrs. Nolan's lawyer.
Catherine Chandler. Mrs. Nolan? You understand the DA's office is considering a grant of immunity for you to testify against your husband. Before I decide whether to recommend that course, I'll need to ask you a few questions.
My client doesn't want to answer any questions until she has immunity. She doesn't want to incriminate herself.
Mr. Rendler, I already have your client's latest statements to the police. I'm only asking her to illuminate some points which are likely to be raised in court.
There are very sensitive issues with Mrs. Nolan.
It was so quiet. That's how I knew it was bad. Usually there was screaming or yelling. Mrs. Nolan, in what condition was Jonathan when you found him? No. I'm sorry, Mrs. Nolan, but we're preparing a case for your husband's grand jury hearing. We need to know what your testimony will be.
Don't you get it? Prosecute her and we lose her testimony. Then all we have against Nolan is circumstantial.
She is an accessory to her own child's murder. She should pay for that.
Maybe. Maybe she'll be paying for it for the rest of her life.
That is not what I meant.
Kathy, you're thinking with your heart.
So will the jury.
Look, I am not going to debate the ethics of granting Molly Nolan immunity because she is the key to this thing. That's what Marino thinks, that's what I think, and that's all there is to it.
How can you be so reductive, Joe? It's not that simple.
In a court of law and for our purposes, it is that simple. As simple as the fact that you and I both know Richard Nolan is guilty.
So, I'm just supposed to put aside my feelings?
If it interferes with your work, absolutely. Tell me now, are you going to work with me on this or not? Do you want me to get somebody else?
I want to do this. It's hard for me to separate myself like that.
I know.
Did the grand jury indict? Is the case going to trial?
Yes, it is.
Is it true Mrs. Nolan lied to the police several times before blaming her husband?
I'm afraid I can't comment on substantive details of the prosecution.
Why is Nolan the only one accused? What about his wife?
Come on, fellas, you know how it works. All I can tell you is the grand jury found probable cause to believe a felony was committed by the defendant. Richard Nolan will be tried by a jury of his peers.
Isn't this just a political ploy by the DA, grabbing after headlines by going after a Wall Street celebrity?
The district attorney works for the people. You, me, and everyone else in this city. He believes Richard Nolan committed a crime against the people. If the man is guilty, we intend to make him pay. That's our job.
What about the culpability of his wife?
What about his alibi?
Do I know you?
I don't know. So what do you think about them letting cameras into the courtroom?
The truth?
Yeah.
I think it's intrusive, voyeuristic, and completely unnecessary.
Sorry you feel that way.
I'll bother you 2 minutes?
Sure, boss, come on in. Why don't you have a seat?
No, I'll just be a minute. By the way, you did a great job with the grand jury.
Thanks.
I just got word that Virginia Sheets is defending Nolan.
From Boggs and McMillan?
Who's Virginia Sheets?
One of McMillan's pit bull proteges. She's out of Yale. An incredible string of wins.
Oh,
Yeah, between Sheets and this whole media thing, this case is becoming very emotional. This was a tough call for me. Really a tough one, but I have decided I want Catherine to head up the prosecution.
What?
Sorry, Joe.
sir, I'm very flattered. But do you think that's such a good idea? I mean, Joe has all the trial experience.
I know that. He's been after me for months to give you more. Look, you're gonna have to trust me on this one. I've been in this game longer than both of you. It doesn't hurt matters at all that the people still identify with Catherine Chandler.
Because I was a victim?
Well, maybe you don't like to see that exploited, but that is strong stuff to a jury, and it may be the one advantage we need if we really want to put this guy away. the bottom line. Anyway, we gotta speak.
Joe, I'm really sorry. I know how much you wanted this case.
Hey, come on, Radcliffe. I'm a team player. But I gotta tell you, I think Marino's logic stinks.
So do I.
I'm not blaming you. I'm just wondering what the hell I've been doing around here for the past 7 years.
Joe.
Vincent?
Yeah.
What is it?
Can't you hear the child crying? Listen. I must find this child.
I'm sorry, Vincent. No one knows where these voices come from.
Where are you? Where are you?
By his own admission, we know that Richard Nolan has, on a number of occasions, physically abused his wife, Molly. Ladies and gentlemen, the state will show that Mr. Nolan also abused his son, Jonathan. On February the 6th, Richard Nolan carried his pattern of abuse too far. On that night, he beat his 5-year-old son, Jonathan, to death. What makes Mr. Nolan's crime so reprehensible is that it was not just a single act of violence, but rather a sequence of acts, all of which display a cold and complete disregard for human life. The sequence began when Mr. Nolan savagely beat his son for interrupting a telephone conversation. The coroner will testify that just one of the many blows was powerful enough to snap the child's neck. Mr. Nolan then ordered his wife to call for help only after he had left the apartment to establish an alibi. She was expected to lie, to claim that the child had fallen. But when the police arrived, Molly Nolan was so distraught over the death of her son that she couldn't keep the story straight. And when the police became suspicious, Mr. Nolan had no choice but to blame his wife. Mr. Nolan expects you to set him free. He expects you to recognize him as a man of prominence and respectability, a man who could never commit a crime like this. Ladies and gentlemen, the state will show that on February the 6th, Mr. Nolan brutally beat his 5-year-old son to death, then coerced his wife into lying to the police. And then Mr. Nolan met his daughter, Amy, for a pleasant dinner.
The great irony in this trial is that my client arrives here today after having spent the last 5 years of his life helping his desperately sick wife, Molly. Mrs. Nolan is a highly unstable woman and an admitted alcoholic. Now, if there were any sense in these proceedings, In my opinion, we wouldn't be trying Richard Nolan at all for this crime. But since Richard Nolan is the one on trial, we must consider the merits of the prosecution's case against him. And our defense is very simple. Mr. Nolan cannot have committed this crime because he was not there when it happened. He was with his teenage daughter from a previous marriage, Amy Nolan, as she will testify. Look at the facts, and the facts will indicate Mr. Nolan is an innocent man.
Now we join our Live at 5 news team with the latest on the Nolan case.
So how do you think Mr. Nolan is taking the pressure? Think you have him on the run?
Nobody is chasing Mr. Nolan. All we're after is the truth here. And another thing. It would be nice if you people would stop treating this case like a celebrity divorce. This trial is not about Wall Street or high society. It is about the victims. Victims of a crime too many of us pretend isn't there.
Mr. Nolan, what message is this saying to the city? Mrs. Jenner, is there any possibility of Mr. Nolan testifying? Mrs. Jenner?
Well, in addition, he had numerous contusions on his face and chest, as well as a cut on his scalp above the temple.
And the cause of death?
Fractured spinal column.
It would take a great deal of force to break a bone like that, wouldn't it, Doctor?
Oh, yes.
Would a woman of my size and strength, let's say, have trouble doing it?
In my opinion, it would be very difficult, yes.
Be honest with me, Doctor. There is no way that you can estimate with certainty whether one individual can or cannot inflict a certain degree of bodily injury to another. Am I right?
Oh, in many cases, one could possibly say...
But in this case, can you determine such a thing with any certainty?
Well, not with absolute certainty.
No further questions.
When Mrs. Nolan showed you her son, was he still alive?
Not as far as I could tell. I couldn't find a pulse.
And what did you do?
I gave him CPR. It was no good. I decided to wait for the ambulance guys.
And this is when you questioned Mrs. Nolan?
Right.
Officer Oberg, you have stated that it was when you questioned Mrs. Nolan that you first became suspicious of her husband. Was he there at the time?
Not in the beginning.
Then why did you become suspicious?
Well, all I did was ask her where he was, and she got all crazy.
What did she say?
First, she said she didn't know where he was. Then she said he'd be back soon. And she got all confused, and finally she said I should just ask him what happened.
You said you found it suspicious when Mr. Nolan reacted calmly when he found out about his son's death.
It didn't seem to come as a surprise to him.
If you were responsible for your child's death, officer, would you be calm? Or would you perhaps more likely be upset, like Mrs. Nolan?
Objection! Hypothetical. The witness is not an expert.
Sustained.
Withdraw the question.
Mrs. Nolan, I understand that
I don't think I can stand it. Talking about it.
I know. But we have to get these details clear in your mind. Tomorrow, your husband's attorneys will do everything they can to make you contradict yourself.
Do I have to go up there? There's no other way?
I'm afraid not. Their best defense is to make you appear guilty.
Make me appear guilty. What if I am guilty? You're just like everybody else. You think I should be up on the stand there with him?
No. No, of course not.
I should just get used to it. Nobody will ever understand.
Molly, I want to understand.
You know how he did it? He told me he loved me. When he hit me, he used to tell me that it was for my own good, and he did it because he loved me. Just to hear him say it was worth the pain. So I let him. And it kept getting worse. And I just kept letting him.
You never fought back.
I couldn't.
You never thought you deserved better.
No. Oh, my.
You do, Molly.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so, Kathy.
It wasn't you. You didn't hurt him. You never touched him.
I didn't help him. I didn't help him.
You were afraid for your life. Everyone knows that.
Do they?
They will. I promise. Molly, make your husband pay for what he did. You can do that tomorrow when you speak in court.
I'll try.
Okay. Let's get back to what happened when the police...
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you.
Mrs. Nolan, when you and your husband were first taken into custody, you told the police that your husband had been away from the apartment when your son sustained injuries in a fall. Was this true?
Mrs. Nolan, I have to ask you to speak up. What is your answer?
No. No.
Why would you lie to the police like this, Molly?
I'd already lost my son, Jonathan, and I was afraid of losing Richard, too.
You loved your husband, and you wanted to protect him.
Yes.
Was there another reason?
Yes.
And what was that?
He told me that
He told you what, Molly?
he told me that
Molly, you said that the first story was a lie. But later you went on to tell the truth. You did the right thing. Tell us the truth now.
I can't
Did your husband hit Jonathan that night? Did he?
Your Honor, she's harassing her own witness.
Miss Nolan, you intend to answer the question?
I can't.
If you don't answer the question, then I'll have to ask you to step down.
Answer the question, Molly. Answer for Jonathan.
I'm sorry. The witness will have to step down.
Your Honor, her testimony must be disallowed. I can't cross-examine her. She can't speak.
She can speak. She won't speak for the same reason she kept quiet the night her son was killed, because she is scared to death of him.
Your Honor.
Miss Chandler, another word and you'll be in contempt.
Your Honor, if the witness won't testify, I move that this case be dismissed on the grounds of insufficient evidence.
Miss Chandler, I have to rule on this. Do you have other witnesses to call?
Your Honor, under the circumstances, I move that my witness be allowed to testify on videotape. There have been other precedents in abuse cases where the victims were allowed...
Those precedents were for testimony by children only. They don't apply here. My client deserves the right to face his accuser.
I'm sorry, Miss Chandler. Your motion is denied.
Well, then I'll need a... I would like to request a continuance.
Defense counsel have any objection?
My client deserves the right to a speedy trial.
Motion for dismissal is denied. Continuation is granted for 24 hours.
On the Battery Park low-income housing development. Also coming up on the news at 10, a setback for the prosecution in the Nolan case as DA's prosecutor Catherine Chandler loses control of her star witness on the stand. We'll have more after this.
No, I think Miss Chandler's doing a fine job. If the prosecution's having problems, it says more about the strength of their case than the strength of their legal help.
Well, the continuance inter...
I'm glad to see you.
Tell me.
That's not going well.
The helpers bring glowing reports.
No, not anymore. We've had a setback.
What happened?
I underestimated the power of the man we're prosecuting. I underestimated his control. He sits in that courtroom with the best defense lawyers money can buy, listening to the atrocities that he has committed with cold, dead eyes. He's making a mockery of this trial and of a child's death, and I can't do anything.
You must continue fighting.
I know.
Even if there is nothing you can do. You must do it for the child. For his memory. And for all of us who refuse to accept that child's death. Alone in a room. That child's suffering must not be forgotten.
It won't, Vincent.
It must not be forgotten. Because that child stands in silent judgment of us all.
Got enough there for two?
Scared me.
Sorry.
I really am sorry, Kathy.
You've come to offer your help. I think it's a little late.
You don't need my help. Never did.
Now you're being sarcastic.
I've been watching you, kiddo. Every move. I've been like every other New Yorker these past few weeks. Glued to the tube. I gotta tell you, I've never felt so proud.
Thank you, Joe. I never expected that.
So tomorrow's a big day. What's the new game plan?
The daughter, Amy Nolan.
Sounds good to me. Go after the credibility of Nolan's alibi. What's this?
I'm not sure the judge will allow it.
You gotta use this.
Yeah, I guess so.
Kathy, the verdict is gonna ride as much on emotions as facts. When the dust settles, you'll realize you did Amy Nolan the greatest favor of her life.
So just to clarify the facts one last time. You were with your father constantly between the hours of 7:30 and 9 p.m. on the evening of February the 6th.
Yes.
And at no time did he leave your company for more than a few minutes. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you, Amy. I have nothing more, Your Honor. The defense rests.
Miss Chandler, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hello, Amy. My name is Catherine Chandler, and my job is to find the truth. I just want you to know that whatever happens, I don't mean to hurt you. On the evening of February 6th, your father took you out for dinner. Is this correct?
Yes.
What restaurant did your father take you to that night, Amy?
A little Thai place near my apartment.
Do you go there often?
I guess.
So, you would say it's one of your favorites?
Sure.
How nice that your father remembers some of your favorite things. So you would say you and your father are very close?
Yes.
Did you know your father physically abused your stepmother?
Objection, Your Honor. She's harassing the witness for irrelevant information.
Your Honor, I am trying to establish the credibility of the most important witness in this trial.
Objection overruled. Witness may answer the question.
No, I didn't know.
Do you know if your father was physically abusive to your stepbrother, Jonathan?
No.
Do you think this kind of physical abuse is wrong, Amy?
I don't know. I guess so.
Did your father ever abuse you?
No.
Amy, I have here your medical records for the past several years.
Objection, irrelevant.
Overruled.
2 years ago, you were treated for a fractured wrist. Do you remember how that happened, Amy?
I'm not sure.
It says here that you tripped and fell. Was that what happened?
I guess.
And 1 month later, you were at the hospital again. This time, you needed stitches in your ear. Do you remember how this happened?
I think I fell down again.
Are you certain? Is that how you recall it?
I'm not positive.
These are serious accidents, Amy. Don't you think it's strange that you don't remember how they happened?
I remember.
Well, then. Can you explain these injuries to us?
No, I can't.
The file goes on and on. Would you like me to read it to the court? What about this fractured rib? And this infected bruise over your right eye? And this broken finger? Can you explain these injuries?
No.
Amy, your father did these things to you, didn't he?
Yes.
And you also knew that he beat Molly and your brother, Jonathan. Isn't that true?
We have to hear your answer, young lady.
Yes.
Isn't that why you testified that you were with your father at 7:30 that night because you were afraid that he would hurt you if you didn't?
No.
you saying that he was with you that night?
Yes.
Your stepbrother, Jonathan, is dead. Are you certain that this is your answer?
Yes.
No more questions, Your Honor.
You may step down.
This case is as simple as the facts presented in this courtroom. Mr. Nolan was not present at the scene of the crime, so he must be innocent. Even if you doubt the testimony that places him elsewhere, you must remember that the prosecution has given no conclusive evidence to incriminate him. No means, no motive, and most important, no witness to the crime. But since the issue has been raised, and I'm sure it will be present in your minds when you deliberate, let me address the issue of Richard Nolan's humanity. It is true that Mr. Nolan has abused members of his family. And frankly, knowing that he is a man of education and great accomplishment, we must wonder why. The answer is, like so many in our society who abuse others, Richard Nolan was, as a child, abused himself. It's a tragic reality that people who are abused often become abusers themselves. Whether this is because they retain some vestige of aggression that needs to be vented, or simply that they become conditioned to communicating with violence, we don't know. All we know is that these victims become like carriers of a deadly disease. But ladies and gentlemen, my client did not kill his son. Whatever else you may think of Richard Nolan, you be sure when you deliberate this charge, you remember there is far more than a shadow of a doubt that he was even present. Thank you.
We have just heard that Richard Nolan is a man suffering from a disease. He passed that disease to his wife, we're told. She passed it to their son. And the boy died from it. Very simple. And the name that's been given this disease is abuse. I will agree that there is a disease here, and I'll agree that Richard Nolan suffers from it. But I won't agree that it's contagious, and I won't agree that it's fatal, and I won't even agree to its name. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to tell you about a place. It's a special place, I know, where this disease does not exist. It's a place that many people go to when they've been in pain, when they've been abused. So the disease does come there, but it never stays. It is in our hearts, in that room where hatred and cruelty do not belong. I have told you that Richard Nolan's disease needed a different name. The name that I would give it is heartlessness. Only a man with an empty heart could brutalize and terrorize the ones that loved him. I believe that Richard Nolan has no heart. And I believe that the proof of that is on Molly Nolan's lonely face. And we also know why that woman could never have hurt her child. She sat on that stand when all of us knew what Richard Nolan had done to her, and still she could not speak against him because she knew that to do so would bring pain to someone that she loved. Molly Nolan has a heart. I am asking you to go to that place in your hearts, to find justice for a brutally murdered little boy. That place is where the truth lives. That place is where each of us carries the cure to this terrible disease.
Have you reached a verdict?
Yes, we have, Your Honor. We find the defendant guilty of murder in the second degree.
Let me just make a brief statement. We are very happy that justice was done in this courtroom today. A guilty man will pay for his crime. But justice will not be served in thousands of other places in this city until we all confront the fact of a crime that happens everywhere and every day. It's not just my job to stop it. It's our job.
Excuse us.
It's over. We won.
Good.
It's a beginning. Where are the voices? It's all so quiet.
Sometimes when the winds shift, the voices and the echoes are lost.
Are you sad, Vincent?
More than once I've heard a child's voice crying out. There was no way I could reach it, no way I could even find it. All I could do was stand here and listen to it cry and wonder, how can we begin to love life? How can we accept its gifts? How can we forget, even for a moment, when children suffer the way they do?
We can only start with ourselves, I guess. With our own lives. To try to touch the ones that cross our paths. It's what you did for me the night you found me. It's everything you've given me from that moment on. We won today because we had the truth. And it touched people. People recognize it in their hearts. It can't be denied. And there is a great power in that. So we keep fighting.
Yes. We keep fighting.